Takes a village to raise a mini course. Thank you for the team that's put it together here. Thank you so much for putting this online for everybody. We have a bunch of people online, right? We won't be able to see them, but I guess we have 18 people online too. So you'll be attentive. Thank you for being attentive to our online folks. They have questions, just interrupt me, talk too much.
And if you have questions on the Zoom, just put it in the chat. You can also raise your hand and I'll see that. But the easiest way is in the chat.
Okay, great. Well, so we have an hour and 15 minutes to solve the vision for the church. Can we do it?
Sure.
Are you optimistic?
Sure.
Yes. Let's hear it. And here's the good news. I'm not going to give you the vision. You're going to give the vision. Oh, no. It's going to be great. We're going to do it together. So it really is an interactive course. So this room is actually better in a fun way. Okay, so we want to think about the future. First slide, please. There it is. So I want to tell a story about a Harvard donor. Colin, who's sitting right here in the front row, is the co-pastor with Kevin of the Boston church. Didn't know you were going to be here till yesterday, but Colin went to Harvard Divinity School with me and remembers my days as assistant minister at the chapel at Harvard University. And we both went to divinity school together. So we've just seen each other for the first time in 35 years.
Oh.
So very cool. Good to see you, Colin. All right, and I'm going to start with a Harvard story. The job that I got at Harvard was to raise money. I had no background in raising money. There were a lot of wealthy people there. And what really struck me is the wealthiest people, names that were on the buildings and I had known in public life, were the least likely to give money. I could not figure it out. So eventually I befriended them and I would go to their houses and I would say, you know, I recognize your name, I know your building, I know the family, you're famous in history, but you never give any money to the church, which you attend every week. And they said to me, and this was like a big dawning for me, because why wouldn't they give money, right? And the answer was, in so many words, we don't know where it came from. We didn't make it. It's ours, and we don't know how long it lasts. We have no way. We can't even imagine how to recreate it. So what we do is we talk about our past. We talk about our buildings. We talk about our history, our family. But right now, we're just going to try to keep as much money as we can while we're still alive. There's no vision. So does that make sense? Why they wouldn't do it? Okay. And what it dawned on me was our denomination faces that same dangerous threat. We talk about our past. We don't know where the money came from. We're going to try to hold on to it as long as we can, but there's not really a vision for it. And that's what we need to do. So that really concerned me, and I've never forgotten that conversation of understanding people. So, and Colin will remember that it was those people that I'm talking about, right? Exactly. Okay, so
They didn't give me any money either.
They didn't give you any money either. So this is that's the Memorial Church. Okay, at Harvard. Next slide, please. So we're very proud of our history. I just found this slide. Gretchen, maybe you brought this photograph? Thank you, Gretchen. This is my grandfather, Reverend Leonard Tafel, once president of the church. I just found him on a slide, took a picture of it. How cool. Pardon me?
Do you know where that picture was taken?
Boston, 1930. I don't know where it was, in for someone's beautiful house, but it doesn't matter. The thing is that we are very proud of our past, and we should be. If you heard my sermon, I talked about our past. We've got some great people in our history. I'm very proud of it, but we cannot continually focus on talking about the past. We must think about what's next. Not dissing the past. I love it, but it can't be all we talk about. Next slide, please. So this one's going to get a little cut off, but it's a quote from Helen Keller. And let's see, I don't know if we can squeeze it in or not, but it's getting a little blocked. But basically, I'll start with it down here. Maybe I can read it on my own computer. That's right. Well, she just says that the people in the new church, that they have this glorious message, and that can often get lost in the fog of materialism. And she says, with all the abounding humanity, there it is, beautiful. I think that the withdrawing out to the new church keeps people from knowing what a glorious message it has in trust for those who are lost in the fog of materialism. With all of its abounding humanity, Swedenborg's message does not reach the ears of all sorts and conditions of men. If the message does not reach them, does not due to any narrowness in the Christian ideal that it foreshadows, but a lack of zeal on the part of those who possess it. I want to see the new church put on its beautiful garments and shake itself from the dust of aloofness. So this is a warning from Helen Keller. We love Helen Keller. She's warning us back then at her convention speeches. You're going to be in trouble if you don't get out of your bubble. Okay? So the warnings have been with us that we have to look to the future. Next slide, please. I thought this quote was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, German theologian who opposed Hitler, a distant cousin, now I know Tafel, and I'm cousin of the Tafels. Did you know that? You did not know it. Julie Bonhoeffer Tafel's his mother. He comes to Philadelphia and goes to the Swedenborgian church on a visit, stays with the Tafels. And after the sermon, I said, what did you think of the Swedenborgian message? And his quote evidently was, you can hear that sermon anywhere. So what's unique about the new church? He had studied it. So we're getting warnings from prominent people who are looking and saying, what's unique about this? What are you doing? Next slide, please. So we follow a visionary. We need our own vision. We need our own vision. We can't rely on just the visionary. Next slide, please. We all know this quote from Proverbs, but it's worth remembering. Where there's no vision, the people perish. So whenever you have a situation where you don't have a way of looking into the future, things will eventually fall apart. Next slide, please. So we're living, I love this image. We're living in a time of change, and we know that in our teachings, the church is the old church is supposed to die and fall apart. And guess what? It's falling apart and it's dying, as predicted by Swedenborg, that there would be a huge shift in the church. So there's huge change in the world. There's more change taking place in 10 years than used to happen in a century for people. Next slide, please. And I did mention this in my sermon, but this is just last week. 522,000 leave the Roman Catholic Church of Germany in 1 year. So we're watching something, and it's so overwhelming, we almost just want to block it out. Just like, wow, it is we're watching a big wave. And we're like, well, just keep doing things the way we've been doing it. Maybe it will work. It's not going to work. The old church is dying. Next slide, please. And I thought this was interesting. And North America, where our churches are primarily focused, is witnessing the largest amount of young adults who are not identifying with any faith. You know, this is not news to you, but I just want to quickly say the state of things are dramatically changing, each decade accelerating. Next slide. I thought this was interesting. I would have thought that people who are continually going to church are the more, high school, less educated, right? I had that kind of image, and the educated were not. Not true. The group that has been consistently going to church the most are the most well-educated people. And that's interesting for us too, because we often say, oh, our teachings are too too insightful, too intelligent. People don't like to think. Well, evidently that's not the case. It looks like the people who are educated are looking for something that will feed their soul, but they want something for their head. And that is good news and surprised me. That just came out. Next slide, please. 40% of Gen Z are unaffiliated with any religion right now. And the story that article is about is the rise of humanist chaplains on college campuses. So I'm just telling you, we're seeing all the signs around us, dramatic changes taking place in the world. If we keep doing what we've been doing and we're not paying attention to this, that wave will wash right over us. Next slide, please. So I found some quotes from Gen Z, but you probably already know this. And if you're in a parish, you meet these people and these strange other people called young people. And they have a very different view. One is, I distinguish spirituality from religion. I have a personal faith in spirituality, meaning I believe in something, but I don't know how to describe it. Another one, I don't think there's one all-powerful thing or a God that holds us all together, but I just don't hold myself to religion. Or I do, he does. I believe in God, but not religion. I think there are a lot of people who feel emotionally damaged growing up in church. One of the lines that I have experienced over and over is when I have young people who finally get in the church, is I say, what was the biggest barrier to you coming to church? And they say, church. And the fact that you look like a church and you act like a church, and there's a lot of trauma out there from people who have been abused. I don't just mean sexually abused. I mean mentally abused through the faith they've been in. One of the ones that have come up, I won't have questions. Let me get through this part. I'll open up the questions. But one of the things that I've noticed is That story about Revelations that I mentioned last night, a lot of people have told me, but I didn't realize they're traumatized by the thought that they were taught that people were going to be lifted up into heaven, people would be destroyed, the earth would go through a battle. They read all the Left Behind series. So there's a lot of trauma. And so church is seen fairly negatively. In one study, they asked people to fill in the blank. Christianity stands for, and the number one thing, can you guess what people were filled in? Christians are judgmental, homophobic. 80%. 80%. It was higher for people who never went to a church. That's how, we got to get a reality check of how we're seen. Quick question.
Clicks and peer group abuse. And you have to watch this with the children and the young people's groups, but you also have to watch it with the grown-up social groups.
It can happen in you're right. It can happen in any group. It can happen in a local group, and it can happen with a peer of any level. So thank you. Okay, next slide. So the nuns are called, you've heard that expression, right? Nuns, they're spiritual but not religious. What I've found in talking with the ones in my church, I have a fairly young group. I've got 2 30-year-olds, for example, on my board. But they all kind of say, when they walk in to test me by saying, hey, I just want to let you know, I don't know if I believe in God. Sort of like get a reaction from you. I don't care. Or they'll say, I don't think I'd ever believe the Swedenborg thing. Who cares? I just don't care. That's not what we're, so where are you on your path? What are you doing? What can we do for you? You're in a spiritual pilgrimage. How can we match it? So they are actually interested in ecumenical things, pluralism. The idea that one religion is saved and the rest are going to hell is very anathema to them. Inclusion is everything. I always joke that nobody ever asked me about my theory of the Trinity, but they ask if we ordain women and we ordain gay people. And then after I said that, a couple weeks later, a stranger walked off the street into the church, and his first question was, what's your view on the Trinity? Like, whoa. They are interested in Jesus. Somehow Jesus has survived through the church. They're lonely. They are seeking community, primarily seeking community. They're very isolated, anxious. Have you seen the anxiety levels? And maybe you've even seen it in the men's rooms, bathroom stalls. There is actually a sign that tells you what to do for stress. It's everywhere on college campuses. Every dean I know is hiring new therapists. Spiritual entrepreneurs, meaning that they have ideas they want to do in the world. They see no way to do it through the church. So it's a disconnect. I want to do this good thing, but I want to do it through my for-profit or a nonprofit or some other way. But I Sunday meeting for a thing to talk about a book, that part doesn't connect yet. They're very justice oriented. They're less into doctrine. No surprises there. Okay. Any questions so far? This is probably not news to you, but we have to look at the assessment. Okay, next. They're online, and they're really online, and they've grown up online, and they're a social experiment, what happens online. But just recently, after the pandemic, our church is now completely hybrid. We call our sanctuary, I call it the online, I call it the studio, in-house studio now. So you come to the studio, I'll take you to dinner if you come to the studio, but most people, even who live nearby, would rather join on Zoom than they would come in. So that's very interesting. And this just shows that a lot of people are, 17% are doing both, but many are attending either watching screens, and some are doing it in person, but we're in a hybrid world, which was just mentioned in the last session on our daily bread and so forth. So we know that we're online, and we're dealing with it right here now. We could have never done a convention where I'm talking to 18 people online and people in the room, and we're all connected. It's fantastic. Okay, next slide. So we're in this time of change and all this chaos and difference that's taking place. And the question is, what is our vision of the new church? Here's the holy city. Let's get into it. We're going to actually figure it out together. Next slide, please. Okay. So we know that regeneration, or how spiritual growth takes place, the first step is self-awareness. Nothing can change until you're aware of it. If you're in a 12-step program, right, everything begins with, I acknowledge. That's why we do confession. It's why nothing can change until we're aware of it. And we work fairly hard not to be aware of our sins. And maybe God only gives us a bit of it at a time we can deal with. But that is the beginning of all growth. If we're going to come up with a vision for the new church, we have to become more self-aware. And that means being self-critical. It's not being negative. It's not being pessimistic. It's just like, let's just be honest. What's going on? Let's just be really honest. So how can we do that? Next slide. SWOT analysis. If you've ever been I do strategy for a living, but I think the SWOT analysis is a wonderful way to begin to think through self-awareness for an organization. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And that's what we're going to do today with all of you. You are going to be the strategist of the new church in this room. I know you didn't sign up for that, but that's what you're here for. That's why God chose you. So we're going to do SWOT. We're going to look at our strengths. We're going to look at our weaknesses. We're going to look at our opportunities and threats. Any questions before we go into a SWOT together? And maybe there's a volunteer in the room who will join our village making this possible, and would be a scribe on the board behind me. Anybody who has that skill set is really good at that. Good handwriting.
I'm not.
Can you do it? Okay. All right. Thank you. She's right here. Perfect.
I've been taking
The volunteer. We had two. Yes.
I'm not volunteering. I'm asking.
No, question. First question.
When you're talking about we're going to look at our organization, are you talking about convention or are you talking about the whole Swedenborgian community worldwide?
Convention. And quite honestly, I don't know, I wouldn't even know enough about the Swedenborgian movement worldwide. It was sort of like in one of the sessions, somebody asked a speaker this morning, what's your view of the general church? And they were like, I have no idea what that is. So I have my views. So, but hopefully, Colin, this will be broad enough for the church that you're involved with, which is the broader church. Okay. Any other questions? All right. So now let's go to the first slide. Next slide, please. Yes, please. Thank you. So when we look at our strengths, these are internal factors. What is going well? What are our strong assets?
Inclusive.
Inclusive. Now, I was thinking I could type these. This is like a live thing. I thought I could type into this. We're going to try to translate from the board thing. I came up with some on the next slide, but I want to hear what you have to say first. Inclusive.
Free to be creative.
Creative.
But kind of piggybacking off the inclusive, but not just inclusive, like different, like growing up, I knew women ministers, gay ministers, like the inclusivity, but also accepting
Accepting.
others.
Yeah, put that with inclusive. Yeah, it's good.
And then also,
Yeah, I'm going to try to do a little bit more. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Embracing to that.
Embracing, inclusive. So you're getting a lot of energy
It's not
around it.
just inclusive.
There's some on the chat.
Yes, chat.
We give the chat.
Yes,
ones.
let's shout out the chat.
So Joyce Barker says strength, inclusive. Mark Vivino says biblical theology.
Theology.
Strength, emphasize love and wisdom.
Let's put that with theology. Love and wisdom.
Doubt is crucial, need to make it your own.
Now, make it your own. Freedom, maybe, or very good. Any other strengths?
Good people.
Good people.
oh, yeah.
Emphasis on a personal God.
Personal God.
Life after life doctrine.
Life after life.
Speaks to our time.
Speaks to our time. Timely. Relevant.
Message that the Bible is not literal. Everything reflects what's going on inside me.
So put that with theology and Bible, and we'll add Bible, because I think that's a biggie.
I don't know how you would say this, but not being like top down, like the fact that like the church,
Bottom up.
yeah, bottom up. the fact that
Grassroots.
I got it as a kid.
Excellent.
That's an emphasis
you.
on personal spiritual growth.
Personal, spiritual growth.
Creative ministry, in other words, a variety of ministries offered,
Yeah, diverse ministry.
diverse ministries.
I'm gonna piggyback off that.
Yeah.
Family camps.
Yeah.
Family camps.
Not dogmatic. And loving community.
we're gonna try to do this live, and we'll see how we can do. This is great. I mean, the feedback you're giving, the insights are fantastic.
There's more. You want-
Yes, there's more. We really like our strengths.
You now have 23 people on Zoom.
Okay, wow. Many years there.
Ecumenical yet high Christology?
Yeah, Christology.
Christology.
High Christology.
Strength, heart, love, head, wisdom, hands, action in the world. The Franciscans share this. Another non-judgmental. Another, am I going too
Action.
fast?
Okay.
Another not dogmatic and loving community. And blessings to everyone in the chat and in the room.
And blessings back to you.
Interfaith.
Interfaith,
Faith and ecumenical.
ecumenical. Any others that you can think of? Okay, so these are the reasons probably you're involved. So they kind of come off the top of your tongue, but we have an amazing amount of strengths. How we're gonna have room for weakness, threats, and opportunity? Who knows? We might squeeze it. We have few weeks.
Maybe honoring science.
Science.
Yeah.
All right. So those are internal factors. And in the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I'll just tell you, some of the stuff that I thought about was God's providence. And what I meant was really the theology, but I do think we're being guided. And without that, I think we're lost. So if we're not following what God wants and God's will as best we can do it. The spiritual insights, I think, are profound. I've studied a lot of religions. I was not raised, particularly in this denomination, so I can compare it with others. And I think our insights that we get are incredible. And I think, as someone said, timely. I think Sage said that. But a lot of people talked about the really interesting theological aspects that are unique. One thing that nobody mentioned that's a strength is that we have a lot of funds per capita. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing we probably have more money per capita than any other Christian denomination in the world. So can someone challenge me on that? Maybe?
Presbyterians have like 200 billion.
200 billion?
Per capita?
But and how many members?
I don't know. They
So
have a lot more
switch the
members.
denomination.
So you divide, okay, everybody's going to Presbyterians now.
Wow.
All right. But we have a lot, we actually have a lot of assets that don't even show up, and we have a lot of funds for a small group. So I think that's an asset, and it's kind of taboo to talk about money sometimes, but it's a critical strength that we have. We have to think about how we're going to use. We don't want to be like that Harvard donor, right? Who just knows they have the money and they're hanging on to it. And I think that just a strength, I think that we are also, I was thinking the technology, we're moving online, we're change. We have a lot of diversity in our things. So those are just some that I thought, but these were fantastic. Okay, enough with strengths. Let's go to, yes, weaknesses, everybody's favorite topic.
I put those in pink.
We can put them in pink, but I don't know, I might be triggered by that. Pink has to be opportunities. Okay, so for weaknesses, interior factors. This is actually, isn't that a great image? That's from Church of the Holy Cities window.
Was the other picture of your church?
Yeah, all these pictures will be from the church.
I have a
Okay.
few from online.
Yes.
And in my optimistic and also special education brain, we call those needs. not
Needs,
weaknesses.
weeds,
Needs,
Needs.
like you need it.
right.
Like when instead of a weakness, it's like a more positive way to look at it. Like, what do we
Right.
need? Not where we're weak, like what do we need to be done?
Right. I'm gonna stick with weaknesses. I appreciate
It's your
that.
presentation.
I do, and you know what, I get that comment, but I think there's something, it's not just a need, it's a weakness. There's a subtle difference, because needs are things that we don't have. Weaknesses are things that we have.
And if you went with needs, then SWOT
Yes.
would become SNOT, and I don't think.
And we could have snot. That might work for kids, but you don't want to wipe off the thing. So it's just very
I was
good.
just going with
I know. But this is the hard, you know what? One of the hardest parts for everybody is to look at everything with like, okay, it's a weakness. It's not, it's something. So
Limited administrative support.
administrative support. So limited administrative support. So,
Well,
or you could say staff too.
Two things. The first is a missing strength, which has been a great sense of humor.
Yes, we're giggling to death here.
And a potential weakness is fear of change.
Fear of change,
Ah,
good one. You're doing an amazing job. honey. Wow,
Lack or absence of
Fear of
vision.
change.
go ahead.
Lack or absence of vision.
Lack of vision. Lack of vision is definitely a major weakness, as we said. If people don't have a vision, they perish, as Robert said.
but and oftentimes the strengths can also be weaknesses in this exercise.
Sure, go for it.
The grassroots thing that we saw as a positive
Yeah.
can also be a negative.
Say one more thing about that.
Just the fact that you have all of these different groups that are all trying to live together can be a weakness if it's not harnessed.
So it's lack of coordination or,
Chasing cats.
Sure.
yeah, lack of coordination.
A sense of being isolated and too lonely, in other words, we don't have enough Swedenborgians in an area.
Isolated, yeah,
Yeah.
isolated. We certainly hear that at the council minister meetings.
Yeah.
Anything online?
Yeah, there's a bunch online. I just
Okay.
didn't want to interrupt.
Thank you for interrupting.
So there's getting out about and mingling in the wider world. Sometimes smaller congregation needs are overlooked. No way to get involved in kind things, no hospitals, no cancer support groups, etc. And then someone says, how about areas for growth rather than weaknesses?
There you
Sorry.
go. I'll tell you, every time I've done this, everywhere I've done it, nobody wants to talk about weaknesses.
And then there's a whole bunch more. I don't know if you
Yes.
want.
So those are good. And the second to last one right before that was,
No way to get involved in kind things.
I
There's no
gotcha, yeah.
hospitals, no
So,
cancer support
so one
groups,
thing is
etc.
small. They're stressing that we're small.
Oh, outreach
Yeah, we don't have the ability to do a lot of different things.
or missions.
Yeah.
Funding doesn't flow easily.
Funds don't flow.
Oh, that's interesting, because someone wrote here, we are very well funded, yet we have churches closing down and some active groups who need financial support, and sometimes we seem stingy.
Stingy. Good. I want to hear those kind of words. So
Yeah.
just say stingy. That's fine. Yes, please.
Either the church is well-known or Swedenborg well-known.
Right. Unknown. That's a great weakness. It's a reality. It's an exterior factor. Yes.
Yes, they were viewed as a cult.
Yeah,
Viewed as a cult. That
Yeah.
would kind of tie with unknown, but certainly, yeah.
yeah.
Yes. I get that all the time. Yes.
Nicholas, I somehow sometimes feel low self-esteem as a religious entity.
Low self-esteem.
Yeah.
That could be an internal factor, right? That's a weakness. Yes.
Not really racially diverse. Like,
Not racially diverse.
I mean, we are a little bit, but we don't read.
Yeah, you can just say it. Not racially diverse. Hard to defend it, that's right.
Yeah, I guess I'm comparing us with the American Friends Service Committee.
Yes,
Quakers,
Quakers.
because they actively engaged in the suffering of the world. And I think that we tend to be very isolated and comfortable in our little places.
Yes.
And there's
Yeah.
no outreach efforts on a congregational, or a denominational scale to actually reach out to those who are suffering, who are ill, in prison, homeless, et cetera, et cetera,
So
et cetera.
isolated, and Connie says, come to the garden church. Because that's all they do is do it. And we have Colin?
Arrogant.
Arrogant. Say more, say a little bit more about it.
Well, it's not only the Swedenborgians, but liberal religions tend to think that they're better than other religions and better than Roman Catholics and that kind of thing.
Sort of condescending.
Condescending. And the other thing is narcissistic. There's an encouragement to be narcissistic.
And do you find it more, so you're not Swedenborgian, but you're a co-pastor. Do you find anything that you see in our church that's particularly a weakness?
As I say, I mean, these two things show up in liberal Christianity.
Yeah, but if there's anything specifically about us, we can handle it. I can't promise you keep your job, but.
I want to say it's one that's not a new one, but it came up when the gentleman mentioned the Quakers. So, which I agreed with. So Churchill mentioned a weakness, which is lack of vision or absence of vision. So this is not new. This is commentary on that, if I may, because it came up with the Quakers. The interesting thing is that the Quakers are known and they do what they do because they do have vision.
Yes.
They're very well organized. There's many of them, but they have a contemplative tradition. They are known as the Peace Church.
Excellent.
So
It's a good contrast.
underline that because I guess I'm, okay, that's fine. I could stop there, but I'm.
Let's
also
just,
gonna-
I've got two more people, so let me just keep
So
going.
I
Go
will
ahead.
stop.
I just want to pick up on that. I mean, so I would hate to see the Quakers ever go out of business because of their devotion to peace. And the world knows about that. The world doesn't know exactly what the
You're-
Swedenborgians are about.
Don't know what we're about. That's it, that's good.
Okay. If I could piggyback off of the arrogance comment, my experience, I'm outside this.
Sure.
Too cerebral.
Too cerebral.
Oh, yeah. I have a lot of Swedenborgians that I encounter, love the philosophy, love the theology, want to talk all day about it. And I'm like, fantastic. What are you going to do with it? Like, what's the next step?
Yes.
Like, I love the chat, I love the community about it, but I'm
That's
like.
good. That's good. It's cerebral. And one of my things, my church community is not, I have two people who are having connections to Swedenborg, right? But, so I have new people. I don't use words like regeneration, for example. I'll say spiritual growth, right? But I have people join online who are Swedenborgian and they start correcting me in the dialogue and say, it's regeneration, Rich. Didn't they teach you anything? It's regeneration. So they're where we get wedded to our words and our intellect, and and the people in my group are like, why are they arguing about what's regeneration? So now I have to explain a topic they may not, so yeah, to your point, I understand what you're saying. Colin.
Well, there was, a strength was mentioned as inclusive, and I would say certainly Swedenborgians mean to be inclusive.
But are we?
Right.
Who's here?
Yeah, not diverse, yes. Okay,
There's I don't know, there's a lot more. in the
we can
chat.
summarize, but I love the engagement, the people are so
Yeah,
engaged.
they have questions for you. They have like this. A couple of them said church is seen as a building, not the people.
Building, not people.
Like they're the aging congregation. Another one said too politically correct sometimes. And then another one said, afraid to step on political toes, like a lot of them are saying that. Smugness, complacency that we're better, so that goes with that one. And then there's like some questions for you here. I don't know if you want to wait on those.
Yeah, I'll just say on the political correctness, sometimes we push an agenda at the top and I find we don't educate people on what we're doing and they feel like they can't say anything, so they just keep their mouth shut. I've experienced that, so I understand what they're saying. Do you want to ask their questions?
Yeah, so it's from a Xander Toth. And Xander wants to know, what are the best ideas, ways to optimize our outreach for the new church in the use of spreading Swedenborgian theology through online platforms?
So we'll get to opportunities and we'll try to string this all together if we possibly can, but we'll get to that question, I promise. Well, we'll do our best, right? We just got hired to do a strategy session.
We're also
We don't have
unmotivated.
to do
We're
it.
also saying
Pardon
that
me?
we're unmotivated. We don't have a proselytizing thing and we don't have a.
Oh, someone said proselytize. They said that on here. That's funny you just said that.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just.
Maybe not
As you wrote
It's a
it.
tricky growth strategy to say, if I don't join your church, the one down the street says I go to hell, and you say, that's cool. Don't worry. Maybe.
So why come?
One more.
The centrality of Swedenborg. So you go to a Methodist church, a lot of Sundays without hearing anything about Wesley.
Yes. So I don't know if you can hear what he's saying, but he's saying, we talk about Swedenborg so much that if you would go to, say, a Methodist church, you would not hear Wesley said this, Wesley said that, Luther said this, Luther said that. You might, Luther, more, but we really do. We have in our church, Swedenborg Insights, we do focus uniquely on the person.
And that needs to be clarified. Otherwise, I mean, you could start to think that he was on a par with Jesus.
Right. And there's
And
always
some
some
do.
Swedenborgians who do, right, exactly. You probably know them.
I like to correct that. I am a Swedenborgian minister, but I teach people who are not, and I do not mention the word Swedenborg.
Okay.
However, I brought the idea.
Great. Okay, great. We want to stick with so those were, I think those are good. One last one.
I've got one more, is that I can't speak for other churches, but we have failed to engage young people to get involved with programs and things to do that are productive, whether they believe in God or not in our church. It's a
Yeah.
big problem.
It is, yeah.
There's a lot of
aging,
those on the
aging,
chat too.
right.
No youth, lack of youth, not
Lack of
enough youth.
Yes.
When we offer
Okay.
diverse programming for youth, but then it doesn't continue. So there's different ways to engage when you're young, but then when you're old, you gotta go to church.
It is a challenge with the, so that's a good, those are all good weeknesses. let's go to our, any opportunities, the next slide. Oh, so here's some I was thinking too, the small size, we've seen a huge membership drop. We're in denial. We keep doing the same thing and keep pretending. And every time someone says we should do something different, we say that's how we've always done it. I think we have a talent pipeline issue. They know we do have a strategy for new ministers. Do we have a strategy for the talent brand that people have mentioned? We're a lot like the old church. We don't sound that much different. Lacking a long-term vision is already messaged. Our message being unclear, a lot of you already messaged. And building focus that people mentioned. I know that in my church, the majority of all board meetings that I was ever involved with when I first came was about the building. You know, the leak, the plumbing, the toilet, but not about people. They're so obsessed with the building, and that's a distraction. Okay. Next slide, please. So what are the opportunities? Opportunities are external factors that we could seize on and look at, and if yeah, let's talk about that. Some of the opportunities were kind of the slides I showed at the beginning, like this new generation is very different in many ways than previous generations around faith and church, and I think those could be opportunities. But any opportunities, let me just yeah, any opportunities that you see now. Don't repeat any of the strengths and weaknesses unless you think it's, but really opportunities out there, things out there in the culture.
World has changed and religion is kind of being rejected by young people. I think that's our opportunity.
Yeah, so in a way, the death of the old church is a huge opportunity for us. Because, to the extent, like I said in my sermon, to the extent we don't completely imitate old church, and otherwise we go down, we'll go down, because we're the last one in, we'll be the first one out. Yes.
Not to derail us, but I think it's important that we stop and take a minute to understand when we're talking about opportunities, what's our goal? What are we trying to accomplish? Do we want people to be members? Do we want to make an impact in the community? Do we want to get the message of Swedenborg out there?
What do you think the answer to that question is?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah, go
so
for it.
from my narrow perspective as director of camp, you know, one of my goals right now is to get people to want to come to Alma, to want to have that experience. And the purpose behind that then being to give the people who come a sense of that community and what it can be like to live in that league and walk away from it with something new. And my vision, if you would, of what our goal should be is to have places and ways for people to engage and have those experiences.
Yeah. So I actually think that you're probably jumping the gun a little bit. We would do opportunities and threats, but I do think, let's say that, because I think you may have just given us a very clear strategic vision, which is my experience in Washington, D.C. So when people come in, I do not say, this is Swedenborg, here's what he thought, this is our church teachings, sign on here in blood on this line before you can come. I just basically say, where are you? What do you want to do? And what's your, and everybody is if they're coming, they're good and they're struggling and they're on a path. And the idea that spirituality might be an asset to them has crossed their mind, but they just don't know how to do it. So I think that's kind of what we're headed toward. How we deliver on that, I'm not sure.
Home is where they take you in and want you, no matter when you come in. Family is when you come in and you feel welcome, and that's Alma.
Yes,
That's what you're doing.
exactly.
Yeah, two relatively young adults have recently engaged with my community, and both of them want conversation. What they want is to dialogue with an open-minded perspective. They want to ask questions, they want to share, they want to hear. So I think one of the opportunities for the new church evolving or descending is to provide space and experience for conversation and engagement in just questions and life, faith.
Exactly. I'm going to go to you next. And I just want to, these opportunities are really important. They're really getting to, in a sense, the strategic vision, what you're kind of all getting at. And that is, we continue to offer kind of the same thing, and they're looking for something different. And that conversation or that growth I just had a young man who was raised nothing and has 3 degrees, super smart, and he's like, give me a Bible course. Like, just, I've never read it. Explain to me and at the basic levels. And he's having mystical experiences and wants to talk about that. And it's, that's his path. It's just, it gives me strength to continue. Yes.
If I may, I think what people are either looking for, and I compare this to like, my parents go to a restaurant, they want to get what they pay for. They sit down, they want certain portions, they want what they ordered, they want to go away walking satisfied. Now people want an experience.
Yeah.
I sit down, I want to dine,
Yeah.
I want to taste the food, I want to smell it, I want to savor it, I want it to move me in a way that I now have a relationship with food that's different than when I sat down. And so that's what I think the younger generation wants. They don't necessarily want to think things like salvation, that's overwhelming, that might be scary. Forgiveness can be a hard topic, but if you can give someone an experience where they walk away changed, even just for a moment, they'll remember that, they'll take that with them, whether or not they come back to the church, back to the service, you've not sent one more out.
Yes. And
Might we add the word affirmed?
what I love about that is,
With an affirmation, at least an expression of love and compassion.
and what I love about that is that if you think about it, what you're describing versus how it was and how it might be now, the best opportunity to meet an experience is mysticism.
Yeah.
We're a mystical faith that is afraid to talk about that, but you'll have an experience. It's an experience you have, and people will believe it only if they have an experience, not because we taught them this course and this was very convincing. So I love what you're saying about people are looking for experiences, and experiences defy logic, and that gets to our head problem because everything is just in the head. So that's great. Any other? Yes.
I'd probably have to tell a brief story to explain this.
Yes.
I retired about 3 or 4 years ago. Didn't know what to do with myself. I was a physician, Rich, Doug Peebles is my name. And I read an article in the newspaper about a bunch of kids who were taking care of homeless people, setting up tents to take care of homeless people. So I went to one of their events, and right now they asked me to be the chief medical officer, which I've become. This is a group called iHelp. And what I can tell you, young people want to do, they want to do something, and they want to do something useful. And they want to be engaged with programs. This group goes to Ghana, it goes to Colombia, it goes to El Salvador. It sets up tents all throughout South Florida and gives a $5 gift certificate to the local grocery store to get people to come in. They do health checks, we refer them to medical care, and these kids love it. There's pre-med students, medical students, nursing students, just kids who are not involved with medicine in any way are all volunteering. And this is exactly what they want to do. They want to find an avenue to be useful, and they want to be engaged with programs to do that. And I will continue to say our church, even though I'm in the Boston church.
Yeah.
Our church is perfectly positioned to do just that because Swedenborg teaches it's the most important thing you can do in this world is to be useful. And this is what kids want to do. And this is how we can engage them as a church.
And that's the definition of true worship.
So I want to play off of that because I think that may be the biggest opportunity for the denomination and our movement in a way. It's for those of you who don't know, my background is I've been involved with the social entrepreneur movement, did the first statewide social entrepreneur competition in the country. And I thought social enterprises, which is when you're trying to solve a world problem and you're bringing a business model to it. And I did investor competitions and so on and so forth. And I work at a firm now where I'm a social capital advisor. So I do bring investors to issues, and it's all young people and they want to do good. And I thought at some point in that work that this is the new church because it's like so innocent, so beautiful. They want to do good. I will say that what I've learned, and the reason I'm a pastor, is they're missing anybody helping them on their inner life. They literally come to me in those coaching sessions and say, how do you decide your moral compass on these things? They ask me that. How do you know when something's right or wrong? How do you know when you're doing your plan? I just don't, where do you get that? I'm thinking, oh my God, that was church. They have no experience of it and they don't know where to get it. So they come to me today and they'll say, should I go to Harvard Divinity School or Harvard Business School? Because I want to do good in the world. The divinity school is not going to help me do good in the world. I'm going to go to the business school. And that's just a really interesting moment that we're in. So we have a program at the Church of the Holy City called Spiritual Entrepreneurs. It's in all of our materials. It's been the most attractive message possible, which is you come in with an idea and we can marry you up to LLC, a nonprofit. We can teach you how to do a board. We can help you do fundraising. And imagine if we were the incubator of spiritual entrepreneurs. People would come flooding. I spoke at Yale Divinity School a while back, right before the pandemic. And the students all waited to do hot seats for their ideas. Not one was a traditional ministry. But they were doing something in Ghana, they were doing something in Puerto Rico, they were doing something in Korea, they were doing something in Argentina. They had these great, and they wanted to marry up a beautiful spiritual calling that nobody ever put two together. So we've got business schools that do the execution, but who is giving the moral inner life stuff? If we can marry the two together, I think your point of what you're doing with your program is right on. I want to go to our studio audience.
Yeah, so opportunities, I think you were asking about.
Yes.
Digital media. There's a large unaffiliated population in our country. We can create new rituals of belonging and worship, become better known because we match well with a lot of Generation Z wants and needs. There's a place of safety, mysticism, and then purpose is crucial to wholeness as a person, which I think speaks to the youth. And then Karen Feel had a specific comment that she said the male-female ministry partnership format that a unity church used in the 80s worked well for them because we meet people where they are and listen for where God is leading them, come up with paired teams to help new inquiries. And then that was like the gist of it.
Excellent, excellent. So, so those are some of the external factors. I think we're getting a sense that we have a match probably with the current population, with our beliefs. We would not be out of sync with that, but we've got barriers, right, for that opportunity. So let's look at, I came up with a couple beforehand just to get us thinking. I'm saying the same thing. Gen Z are seekers, they're seeking things. The death of the old church is an opportunity that if we can break ourselves from it ourselves, we can capture something. And I do believe our ideas are embraced right now when I'm talking to people. It's also how you translate it. And you do not start with words that are alienating to people, or say, read Arcania Celestia or something like that, or hand them a Swedenborgian book the first time they come. They will be, and as Colin is saying, just talking about Swedenborg so much does sound cultish, frankly. It sounds like you constantly talk about you're worshiping a man, and it's not. And he would be offended by that, frankly. His ideas that would be implemented. So lots of opportunities. Yes, please.
So when talking about young people, you are talking about Gen Z. Is there a reason that millennials get skipped? Because they're not necessarily present either.
Over the last generation.
Well, I guess millennials are old. That's why. No, I'm kidding.
That's fair. But my point is, like, looking at the continuum, it sounds like when talking about young people, you're skipping a generation of people.
I'm purposely focusing on Gen Z in this presentation because it's pretty much unknown. Like, people don't know about it. We kind of know, at least in my world, a lot about the millennials, and we can do a whole generational thing.
Okay, I didn't mean to derail.
No, I want to highlight Gen Z because I think they're even more aligned than millennials.
Okay.
What I discovered with millennials there was the biggest difference, I would say, is millennials had a certain confidence. Gen Z is much more of a seeker. There's something different, and that's Gen Z is much more conservative in many ways. So it's just a very interesting thing that I kind of wanted to raise up because it's brand new really in the world, but it does kind of match up. So we love the millennials, but we love the boomers. We love the boomers.
Oh, what about Gen X?
We love Gen X. We love Gen X.
You love the boomers?
Who doesn't love the boomers?
Everybody.
Oh, I thought the boomers were the most popular. All right. Boomers to zoomers. All right, next slide, please. So the threats, external things that are threatening us. We'll do a lightning round on this. We're getting a little beyond the discussion. It's so fantastic an opportunity. Relevance. The threat, are we even relevant? That's a threat, or we could be irrelevant. Threat.
Are we really new?
Are we new? Kind of Bonhoeffer's comment. I heard that somewhere anywhere. I've heard people say, what's new about the new church? One factor about your point is that Swedenborg said these things in these predictions, like I was saying in my sermon, over 200 years ago.
Yeah.
A lot has happened.
Yeah.
And he's talking in this period, and we're still talking as if we're in 54 and 17 when he died in 1772. We've gone through a whole different stage of the new age, and we have to tap into what reality is. So what's new is completely different from what it was when we look back. So that's an excellent point. Yes.
A Christian church that has a reputation for being right-wing, evangelical, intolerant, and people can just assume that we're.
Yeah, like that data of like, what's Christianity homophobic? I mean, that's the number one thing. So yeah, we have a brand of the church that is, I cannot tell you the number of people who've said to me, you know, I'm trans or I'm gay or whatever, and they're in the church and like they're crying and they say, I've never been in a space that accepted me before. And I'm kind of stunned, to be honest. Like I didn't know it was that bad, but it's so much trauma from the old church out there that the more we look like it and imitate it and sound like it, it's not attractive. So excellent.
The flip side of that though is, and I've had this conversation when I'm trying to explain this to someone who's never heard of it, what is Swedenborgian ministry? And it's, you know, I associate it as Christian religion because it is Bible based. And I don't want it to come across as a cult, you know, but at the same time, like you say, once you've kind of associated it with the larger Christian church, now all of a sudden all the negative that is currently part of that and attached to it comes with it. So how do you balance?
That's a great threat, because if you're going to, there's a book called Purple Cow. It was a great marketing book, but it just said the purple cow in the field is the one that's recognized. If you're not weird and you're niche, you're not recognized. So if you imitate every other company and you say, okay, your business will not work. However, if you're weird, people say, is it a cult? It's so strange that it's off-putting. And I think we just have to figure out, I know we have to do it as a pastor. You have to use language that is matched to the person you're talking to communicate what we do. You have to translate so that they can hear it. And I do think, going back, if we can marry it to their path more and shift even the conversation to their path and less about like what we want from you and make it less transactional for us, I think we can, you know, Colin, you had your hand up?
I was going to piggyback on that. I think as I listened, it's what's missing, although you've touched on it for sure, but it's what's missing is where's the distinction?
Where's the distinction?
And where is identity? People still want identity.
That's great. Where is identity? Where is the distinction? So I think those are excellent examples of it. So we've gone through strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, threats. Next slide. I did a couple of threats that weren't really mentioned, but membership loss. We're in a death spiral as membership for the denomination. I mean, we go up and down. Like the DC Church was once at 4, now it's 30. So it's not like it's guaranteed to go down. We're at 35 now. There's division among groups. When I say that, I mean it in the culture. So we are in a politically charged time where you are very quick to cancel people who disagree with you. You're kind of putting out, or a lot of people in the church have told me, I just keep my mouth shut. I'm not going to offend anyone. I'm not going to tell you people what I think because I don't want to be on the wrong side of it. So that's out there. Anxiety is a huge threat in our culture right now, particularly for young people. It's off the charts. And suicide rates among young women have skyrocketed. Skyrocketed. A lot of people would say it's social media, but it's a lot of things. But I would also say it's a culture that is nihilistic, meaning if all you do is deconstruct and all you do is say everything sucks, and you say it again and again and nothing's going to work, and climate change is destroying it, everybody's bad, the United States sucks, this sucks, every politician sucks, and then eventually you're just like, what's the point of life?
Yes.
And that's a very dangerous thing. So we're seeing these things, but there's a lot of fear and anxiety. The times are chaotic and unpredictable. A lot of things that have happened in the last 20 years, nobody would have predicted, right? And I think the buildings is another threat in that most of our buildings are mismatched to the size of the group they're trying to get the needs. You know, in DC, we're talking about selling the building and getting a townhouse, making it a space where people would complain when they came into our sanctuary that seats 400 and sit with 12 people. And they were like, I felt sad coming in, you know, because the space says something. Where's everybody else? That's sad, right? And, but what if it was a space that had a kitchen and had rooms for people to stay on retreat and had, you could hang out and it felt more like a living room and it built a community. Those spaces might be it, but right now we are probably like that Harvard donor. We're very wedded to our buildings. Yeah.
I'm curious because anxiety has come up several times in this presentation, and here it is as a threat. Why isn't that anxiety an opportunity for the church?
So what you do, so let's keep moving here, Colin. You're just moving us right ahead. Let's see, maybe if we took our threats and sought to address them and seize the opportunities, we might choose an answer. So next slide, please. So then you kind of do an analysis. One reason I want to share this, and I'll share the PowerPoint with you afterward if you like, you can do this with your local church. It's just a great way to unearth, look at you've all come up with ideas of what's going on. But that conversation, I think people think we're afraid to have it. I think we're desperate to have it. Just let's get it all out there. Swedenborg says things can't change until we're aware of them. So SWOT just brings those in. And there's no judgment, right? When we did weaknesses, nobody cried. When we did threats, it didn't destroy anybody. It's just the way it is. Okay, next. Oh, am I missing anything from online?
There's just a lot of comments.
People are engaged.
People are really engaged.
We can read them later.
Yeah, I will save it for you to read later, but there's someone is saying there's a fear of change, like the threat is the fear of change. That's one threat.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so there was a couple people that were.
Yeah,
talking about
it's
that.
the easiest thing. It's not, sometimes it's not even a fear. It's just like, we did it we've always done it that way. It's just such a, because it's traditional and it's easy. It's just like, because if I have to rethink this.
Everything else is changing.
And everything else is changing. So I just thought if we built on our strengths and we seized some of our opportunities, just some of the ideas that I had was, Tom had mentioned near-death experience. A number of you have mentioned being ecumenical. One thing that doesn't get highlighted, I mentioned it last night, but the idea that we believe in the evolution, spiritual evolution of the world, is really, among a certain group of people, that is one of the hottest topics right now. And it's called the integral movement or the meta-modern movement or the post-postmodern movement. And Swedenborg predates Hegel, and they are all into other evolutionary teachers, Darwin, Hegel. Swedenborg had that vision of the epochs of the church. Long before that, we should embrace it because it's predictive of what happens. The idea that an experience of being mystical, a lot of people are very interested in angel things. And I've noticed when I'm with young people and we're out at a restaurant and they've never been to church, they're telling me their angel story, their mystical story, their dead grandmother put her arm, whatever it is, and they whisper it across the table and say, if anybody from work ever heard me saying this to you, I'd be fired. They wouldn't be fired, but it just shows the fear and the culture of just embracing. And we might be the place that if we make it normal. So I occasionally throw into my sermons a mystical story of something weird that happened. I say, this is going to sound weird, but this is what happened. People come to me afterward and have a mystical story.
Yeah, so I was just talking to somebody who's in tech and stuff and saying with AI, things are going to be extremely different in 5 years. So churches need to focus on these kinds of experiences as being a place that nurtures the mystical as well as the creative, artistic aspect of the human being.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. I did a sermon on AI.
Yeah.
I get requests from my young people. That's the biggest issue they cared about. Yeah. And in the sermon, I basically said, AI is going to take everything that's mechanical and move it more mechanical.
Yep.
And it's going to make whatever is human more human.
Got it.
And that's a space that we can provide.
And capitalize on it.
Beautiful, beautiful point. I also think for where your money is where your values are. Remember that parable of the talent. Which one is the worst in the story?
One who buries it.
The one who buries it. You know, it's like I didn't want to lose anything. I think we have to really look at our finances too. One thing is along the lines of use was mentioned by a number of you. But if we were a place that invested in young people who had creative ideas for doing good in the world and offered them spiritual counseling and investment opportunities through a grant and a coach, an accountant, a place, if we married that together, that is our theology. Our theology says that until you act on what your beliefs are, it is dead. faith without works. We could be that space that could do it. And I can tell you, nobody will care that you're Swedenborgian. They'll care if you're the group that's investing in their thing and you cared about what they're trying to do, they will come running to us. The other is, I also think we have to invest in leadership. I'll just, if ministers are the future, and maybe, you've listened to me too long and you wish they weren't, but if they are, it is a terrible path right now to be a minister in our denomination. For example, you have to go to school, go into debt, and then you have that money, and then you graduate, and then you're told you may not get a space because the churches may not be available. We've just completely cut the pipeline. So the new scholarships that were announced, these will have to be the way we go in the future, something that's attractive, and to have a talent pipeline. Any other business is seeking talent. We should be going to divinity schools and talking about our faith, and talking about our ordination path, but it will require a minister pathway. Next slide. I also think we could double down on what's unique about us. Remember, we were talking about the purple cow. We were talking about what makes us different. You had mentioned, Tom, about near-death experiences. There's whole communities organized online about near-death, and they never seem to understand that Swedenborg mentioned all these things 200 years ago, but they're really into it. We should be speaking at near-death conferences. The World Parliament of Religions, Gladys Wheaton, Reverend Gladys Wheaton is in a one-person campaign at this convention to say, we were there at 1893, where are we now? There's a group organized. We should be partnering with ecumenical groups. The spiritual entrepreneur opportunity, inclusion. We've been pretty much on the cutting edge of ordaining women and gays and lesbians. We have a gay person who heads the Council of Ministers, and I don't think anybody cared about that. And honest to God, I don't think people talked about it for 2 seconds. That's really unique in Christendom. Just one quick little story is that I'm on the National Council of Churches. I'm rewriting the bylaws at their request. I updated the inclusion list. Guess who's not on the inclusion list? The gays and lesbians and transgenders. So I added it and I created a firestorm. I mean, I might even resign from the National Council, but it's a huge issue. People started yelling at me across the room. Progressive churches yelled because I tried to put it in. I tried to sneak it in. So I'm just saying it's a live issue. We think it's like, what? No, it's a live issue. We're doing that. Justice, we could do a lot more on it. We've done stuff in the past. Peacemaking, the event I did last year about building across divisions. It's a very hot topic that comes from my Swedenborgian theology and the spiritual entrepreneurs. I keep mentioning them. Next slide. What can we do to mitigate weakness? We need to inspire people. Again, we need to avoid looking like old church. I think we could diversify a lot of our roles. We have a lot of ministers who are writing sermons every week with technology. Maybe we have 6 preachers that we pay well, and they preach from a studio that everybody can tap into or something. But then we have in local places, MSW and chaplains who can go and meet people in the community. They don't have to preach. Maybe we could diversify our roles a little bit and pay people to be in different locations, but use technology. I would love to have a team of consultants for, particularly, I know for our ministers, they're always asking, what if there was someone who taught you, who just researched grants for you at Almont or at a local church and said, for Deborah's Tree, and said, I can get, do you know about these grants? That could be a one consultant, consultants on a lot of expertise that we don't have, was mentioned. We lack it. We could invest in that. And I think that the talent pipeline is really important at every level. What God has given us, and thank you for the people who are leading the young people, but every year that I come to this, the young people kind of blow me away spiritually. I'm not exaggerating, I'm not sucking up, I'm just telling you, when I watched them sing today, it's almost in tears. It was like a beautiful spiritual innocence. What are we doing to build a pathway that they would want to be engaged in this through their whole life? Other than that, I know that a lot of them have partners through the group. That's a good thing. Next slide. So what plan can we implement? Next slide. Well, I came up with some ideas, but this just summarizes everything that's been said so far, but we can follow God's guidance. God is calling this group to something. I believe it. I wouldn't waste my time with it if I thought this is just a club. Can we inspire people with a vision? Can we avoid following the path of old church? Diversifying roles. So these are things I've already mentioned, but engaged in various other places that I've already spoken about. We could actually create a plan for the denomination that everybody's on board with and have that the topic of conventions, where people are coming and we're getting your feedback on it. And there's a reason to show up because we're co-creating. Next slide. Imagine we're the catalyst of the new church. That's a very important thing. We are not the new church. I know somebody got offended by me saying that in my sermon. We're not the new church. The new church is a much, he says it's going to take place for the whole world. It is. We could be catalysts. We have a unique role. We have a blessing that we have insights. But what if we were the catalyst and we could play that catalytic role as a tiny player? We don't have to be big. And stop talking about being small. Being small could be an advantage. Invest in the most creative things. Invest in our talent. Partnering. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's groups doing near-death experiences, NDE. There's groups doing pluralism. There's groups who are doing entrepreneurship. There's groups that are bridging the divide and justice. We could partner with them and be a partner. Imagine, I would love to see us investing ourselves in the spiritual enterprises. And I would love to have people talking about our faith because of what we do in the world. Oh, that's the group that did this. I don't want to talk about the past. You know, I don't want to just talk about people who did things in the past. The people in the past, Helen Keller is criticizing us. And what she's doing, she's like, if you keep doing this, it's not going to go well. And here we are today. And I say, try new things and fail. Make mistakes and try again. That's the only way you grow. So could this be the future of the new church? We're ending just on time for maybe a few questions. Next slide. I just want to say about impact. I'm not boasting here, but last year I gave this presentation of the Tower of Babel and how we could overcome division. I turned into a course. You, Shannon, you were at that course, and a number of you came and signed up for it from the church. The White House had me do it for their fellowship training a year later. So did our size stop us from doing that? Right. Was it because we're not well known? Is it because people don't understand? No, that's built on a Swedenborgian theological thing. Of course, I do not mention that in the training. It's nothing to do with it. I don't even mention my minister, frankly. I don't stress that. It's in my bio. But the point is, we can have an impact. We should not get cynical about this. We can't do it. It's just not going to be the impact of imitating old church. Next slide. And I don't want to become that Harvard donor who's talking about the past and fearful in the present. Next slide. Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. Helen Keller, the theme of our thing, we've got to have an optimistic thing. Because you cannot inspire people by negativity. And finally, any questions? Last questions. And how much time do we have for questions? Because we're at the time, and I just want to know. I want to honor the next events. I'm running into
Question?
What's next?
Dinner's at 5.
The next event is dinner at 5 o'clock.
Okay, so I just want to honor, it's to honor time. Anybody that needs to leave and wants to go, but I'm going to stay around and answer all the questions that anybody has that I can possibly answer till 5 o'clock. So, but technically it's over and don't feel free to leave.
You'll need a slide.
No more. Thank you. Let's give our slide.